ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all well, that you've come through and had a good night's sleep. Most importantly, I hope that you all enjoyed last night's dinner and gala at the theatre just down the road. And perhaps I'd like, just on all of our behalves, to extend a very big thank you for last night to the City of Vic and, of course, to the Spanish Equestrian Festival, I almost said, the Spanish Equestrian Federation. So thank you very, very much. So yesterday we had an awful lot of discussion, a lot of debate about current topics and decisions and developments that will be made in the sport, even during this coming year, running through to the General Assembly. This morning's session, the final session of the forum, is very much geared towards looking even beyond that, modernization of the sport. Where do we take the discipline of endurance in the years ahead? So this session is very much going to be taken forward by the Endurance Technical Committee, with the various members presenting from their perspective. We also have with us, who I'll introduce in due course, Nick Brooks-Ward, who will present a few ideas, a few thoughts for future development from the organizers' perspective. But to set us hopefully on the right track for the morning, I'm first of all going to invite back to the stage Brian Sheehan, the Technical Committee Chairman for Endurance. Thank you, Brian.
Good day, everybody. If anyone wants a translation, is how are you in English? I just have a few trouble with machines like this. So let's see. Right. This is a very interesting topic of where we were, where we are, and where we're going to go to. It's like looking into a crystal ball, and generally predictions are all wrong because other factors come in and change. So what we're looking at is where the discipline is going to go in the next couple of years. Is the discipline going to stagnate? Is it going to reduce in numbers? Is it going to get better? Are we going to have more finance? Are we going to have no money? So will our spectators grow or decline? That's what we've got to look at. So what I'm going to talk to you about is where we were, where we are now, and this wonderful diagram gives us an idea of the growth of endurance. You see endurance is in the black print, and it shows that in 2007 there were 466 endurance events, and if you go to 2015 it's 911 events. It shows a substantial growth in the discipline. But if you go to the next highest sport, it is jumping, which was 720 in 2007, and has gone extraordinary out to 1,586 events since 2007. So at one stage we were very close to jumping with our number of events, and I remember there was a meeting where endurance sort of was about 5 events above jumping. Immediately the jumping committee went into a back room somewhere and came in and they'd found another 10. So just put us above them. So it is a bit competitive. Everyone's proud of their discipline, and of course the FEI is a pretty slick organisation, I reckon. Now this just shows the registered riders since 2007, and it's a 58% increase in the number of registered endurance riders since 2007. And that gives you a difference and a positive of 2,444 registered riders. That's a big jump, isn't it? Now this one is the registered horses since 2011. And on the left-hand side, you show that in 2011 it was 9,698, and now it's 13,311. That's a 37% increase in the number of registered endurance horses since 2011. What was that? Is there a mouse in here? That means you're distracted. Did you put your camera down? Okay. This is my meeting, okay? You do what I tell you. Now, where was I? So there's a difference of in registered riders of 3,613. That's a great growth, isn't it? So this is the National Federation shows and events, and so if you look at the green one, too small. There we are. The green one is the number of events. The red one is the number of shows, and the number of national federations down at the bottom. So we want to look at the number of events, and I think it's worthwhile looking at the line across here. It's starting to flatten out. And also if you look at the number of shows, which is this one here, the red one, it's starting to flatten out and go down a bit. So the growth may be stalling a bit, may not be. Just got to see how the figures go over the next period of time. Now this one is the athletes, horses and starters, and the number of athlete registrations is in blue. The number, you can probably read it better than what I can do here. The number of horse registrations is in red, and the number of starters is in green. Still, you just see that slight flattening out that's occurring there. This is a very good slide on a number of starters and the elimination for a regular gator metabolic. This wasn't used, I don't think this data was used in the GIS. This was data we've got ourselves. And what it shows that in the number of starters that are not lame is about 69%, so it's about 70%. And you see if you go back through those figures, there it sits around about 63, 60, 60, it's remarkably reliable and stable. And then you go to the bottom blue, which is the number of horses that were eliminated by percentage of horses by lameness or metabolics, and it sits around about 30%. I think the GIS had about 37%, but this is about 30%. So this one here is an important one, and you note if you look at the top, is that up the top up here, we're looking at this one here. And this one here is the number of registered horses, is in the green in the middle. So we'll start from the far corner. The number of horses already in competition is this one, that one there, the number of horses already in competition. And then we have the number of newly registered horses, which is the middle one. And then we have the number of horses that left the competition. So 20% of the horses, let's say last season, left the competition, but 32% came back in. So we are not sending more horses away than are getting in this sport. So where do we want to go and what's the future? So this next part is a sort of a kaleidoscope of thoughts I had one night, little balloons that went up. So I decided to improve it in this. This is the vision for our sport. You don't see it written very much, but it was in the front of the ESPG, and it's the only one that we have out at the moment. And that is to ensure that endurance athletes compete and win fairly whilst maintaining the highest standards of horsemanship. That's the front, that's the future, that's now, it wouldn't change. And there's the sustained development of the sport globally, operating within the FEI Code of Conduct and the welfare of horses. Happy to. Anyone who thinks they can do a better job on that, I'll be happy to see it. The values of our sport are clean sport, that's medication control, horsemanship, which also means equestrian training and welfare of the horse, sporting integrity, which is our judicial system, and a partnership between the horse and mankind. So in early competitions, the phrase "to compete is to win" was the driving force of this sport. The question is that still reliable? To compete and to win was considered a personal achievement, and the prize for competing such an event in the Tevis and the Quilty wasn't money, it was a bag of feed or a buckle. And that was the pride by getting the horse home. And that's, you have to think about this, to compete is to win, and say, this is relevant to our sport or it's not. I think it's relevant to our sport. Endurance is a modern professional sport where success now at an endurance event is achieving personal and national expectations. So the countries and sovereign governments are looking at it, not just a backyard sport. It contributes to the stature and prestige of the country and also the individual that wins the events. And now we have prize money and valuables, cars, but what else is occurring is that there's an increased value of the horse. So a horse would once qualify from novice to 3-star endurance, and the value of the horse would increase. So an example, and this is a bit out of date now, but a novice horse valued at $4,000 would sell for $40,000 or more once it got its 3-star, or it was a registered endurance horse who completed 160 kilometres under national rules. But there's increasing pressure now for owners to get horses qualified and for sale. So this increased value of endurance horses is filtered down in a number of ways. There's an increased demand for endurance horses nationally, and that is really in Group 7. Number of horses naturally. There's an increased market value now for proven endurance horses, and there's pressure to get horses qualified as an endurance horse as soon as possible to get them into competition. An increased competition at local rides leads to faster times, and this leads to increased risk of the welfare of the horse, and there's an increased responsibility on officials and veterinarians to protect the welfare of the horse. And that has caused the development of highly skilled officials and endurance veterinarians. I don't mean for 1 minute that veterinarians are held totally responsible for the horse's welfare. It's always the rider is responsible first. The veterinarian's just there to help get things right. So the veterinarians don't take on the owner's responsibility. The veterinarians, it's the owners, and it's the person responsible has the owner's responsibility to get this horse back to the ride base. So, but we are a global sport. This is in Mongolia. It's the first endurance ride. They don't look very happy, do they? And you see that wooden saddle? I think that would hurt, actually. And to those of you who remember going to the UAE when this was the newest building put in town, and I remember going there and thinking, isn't this amazing? And how it blew down from the storm a couple of nights later, and the new building has been put up. And if you see the change from this, I think how many veterinarians here remember going to this sort of, yep, unbelievable, wasn't it? And now there's this massive vet gate there that looks like it could control a space shuttle. So when we had the task force, the mission of the task force is all these missions set your standards for the future. Well, it was to develop practical solutions for our sport, for the issues that come before us. It's to ensure horse welfare and a level playing field for endurance events globally. So when we make a rule, it's not made for here, or Group 1, Group 2, Group 7. It's made for our sport globally. And we look at and deploying technology. Technology is going to become a bigger part of our sport and achieve the goals of equality and integrity for all endurance competitions. So they're not bad topics. So the task force came with these recommendations, which we have almost completed putting in, but shows an indication of where we're going to. A minimum level of technology is required for timekeeping, video surveillance, vet gate surveillance by video, stable surveillance, and on the trot-outs. Video surveillance of all those things seems quite intrusive, but that's part of what happens with security to a modern big sport. The use of GPSs on horses and athletes is now routine. Approved timing and heart rate systems are being fine-tuned. There's additional level of competition, which is the 5-star, which recommendation that we've taken from this report and to put into place. There's to limit the number of competitors. That is, you don't need to have a field of 300. You want the best. You want the best at this competition, not everybody at the competition. A limited number of competitors too. We want the best competitors, not every competitor. If you go to the Tom Quilty event, which is an iconic event in Australia, we have the winners and we have the finishers and we have the would-be's if they could be in the middle. And what we're after is the best riders, but this is a significant event and we haven't quite developed that properly yet. Review the qualifications for people going into international competition. So the qualification stepping is now about to go into review. New formats, and the formats should be that which gives a showcase to our sport. A format change where we have just a 160 kilometre, that's our world championship. Is there another format than that we can use in this sport? Let's have a look. So also we have rule enforcement, fair play, and we've introduced the rankings. So a lot of this has not been there 3 or 4 years ago, but it's there now. The WEG made some recommendations, which Tim may comment on at some stage, which is to to explore the possibility of format changes, which FEI went through quite a few tiers over this to see if we can get format changes. And it's difficult to change things and difficult to change your comfort zone. So what it was a recommendation was that we look for longer competitions, which show our sport up. Increased revenue, if you do have more competition and more popular competition, it will give increased revenue to the organising committee. And there would be more interest from the public and the media. And that would help maintain the growth and stability of the sport and give some financial security. So if you look at the disciplines at the recent WEG, and this is the timetable allotted to the various disciplines. 6 days for reining, with a 2-day rest period, 6 days for jumping, 5 days for dressage, 5 for the demonstration of the disciplines, 5 for para dressage, 4 for eventing, 4 for vaulting, 4 for driving. Just can't find endurance on that page. There it is at the bottom, 1 day. Endurance had 1 day of competition. So what does that mean to us? Well, it means a lot financially. It means a lot on the popularity of the sport. So this gives you an idea of how popular the spectator attendance was at the WEG. Eventing had 94,600 over 4 days. Dressage had 83,000 spectators over 4 days. Jumping was 110,000 spectators. Driving was 31,700 spectators, and the marathon was viewed by 16,000 people. Vaulting was 33,000 spectators over 4 days. Reining was 14,000, and endurance was 6,000. Someone must be subsidising the endurance competition, because a lot of this money comes from the WEG, comes from those big spectators. So where does the future take us to? Well, always we'll be under welfare scrutiny. Always, always, always. Funding and sponsorship is that how stable is the next ride under your OC? Do you have enough money? Do you have money in storage? Where are you looking for your sponsorship? Is it always from the one place? Have we developed a sponsorship routine for ourselves elsewhere other than Group 7? So we should look at our funding and be more stable. New formats that put our sport out there with the other sports that are popular and people will want to see. And I know before people say, but it's hard to do that with endurance. What I'm saying to you is we haven't thought it out yet. Technology will play a big part. We want to have a spectator-friendly sport. We want research. We've seen the benefit of research from the scientists that were over here. Where are they? They haven't reported to me today. Oh, that's okay. I'm just ticking you off. You're going to stay here and listen to this like everyone else. Research, equitation is a big deal. You know, so many people get on an endurance horse and just keep riding and they haven't learnt their riding skills very well. And we want excellent education. And if you realise we've only really just written the course for athletes recently, it would be in the last 6 to 8 months, we've written a course for athletes. You'd think that there would have been a course for athletes years ago, but we didn't think they needed it. But now they do need it because they needed to understand the rules, they needed to understand welfare and education. So what are my expectations for the future? I can't tell you what yours are, you've got to tell me, but I'll tell you what I thought. I sat there with this little bubble up going, well, I think we should have the highest standard of horse welfare of all the FEI and non-FEI disciplines. We should be extremely proud of our horse welfare because the horse carries us through this incredibly difficult sport where they'll be out on the road for 8 to 16 hours. And so we should have the highest standard of welfare, the highest standard above anyone else. Our officials, because of this long duration of the competition and because of the pressure put on them by higher levels of competition, should practice the highest standard of integrity at all times. That's veterinarians and other officials. New and successful competition formats for individuals and teams with high completion rates and that are entertaining to watch. We have to develop that. Self-funded discipline, ensuring financial stability. We need that. And education, more education, better education, and the use of technology for those people, officials, athletes, and trainers. So what I ask you to do is you should write out what your expectations are. If you're going to stay in this sport, you can tell me, I've told you what mine are. I'd be happy if you gave them to me in a bit of paper. Or if you haven't thought of this, you should go and think about where would you like to see this sport in the next 5 years and going out from there. Thank you very much.
I wonder whether you might stay here, and therefore Valerie might a little bit of company on the stage in due course. So Valerie is now going to join us on the stage. I reminded through Brian's presentation there, he talks about how much the sport has changed. He talked about the value of the horses, 4,000 to 40,000. I have a hunch it perhaps goes a little bit beyond that in some respects now. But it also reminded me, in fact, of learning just yesterday that Valerie's first World Championship horse, I believe, only cost around $500. So things really have moved on. We're splitting this morning into 2 stages. The vision, I think, has been brilliantly set by Brian. I think the fog of his travels, his long journey here has finally cleared. I think he's presented that quite brilliantly. He also managed the technology particularly well this morning. We're now going to start to expand on a few of those themes. First of all, through Valerie, and then through Nick Brooks-Ward from the organizer's perspective. So, Valerie, over to you. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My topic was, Sabrina came to me and said that, what would you, as an athlete, like to see in your sport in the next 20 years? We've had tremendous changes in the background. What would you like to see going forward? And I have to tell you, my first thought was 20 years. I wonder if I'll be alive. Honest to goodness. And secondly, will I still be riding? Well, today I am still riding. I have elite rider status, and I maintain that elite rider status. So that means that I'm still competing in 100-mile events. Sometimes my thoughts have to be better living through chemistry, but I'm still able to compete and ride at that level. For how long, I don't know. So we have had tremendous changes in our sport in the last 20 years. And when I first thought about this topic, I thought, as Brian, all the different aspects. And then I stood back and I thought, yes, what do I want? What do I want to see? And where and what do I want our sport to go? And here was my real thoughts. I want to be part of a sport that I can be proud of. I want a sport that challenges my abilities and where athletes and horses alike can be respected, admired, and inspire others. That was my main thought. And through that, I realized that while we speak in FEI about horse welfare, it truly is the most important thing. Because if we do not take care of our horses, if the public sees us as using and abusing horses, we will never, ever be respected or admired. That is the bottom line. So how do we do that? We have many rules. We have rules in place to protect our horses. We have educated vets that Brian has talked about to examine before, during, and after our events. We have rest periods. We've heard much about the importance of rest periods and how consecutive work and our sport creates stresses on horses, and they need to be able to rest and recover. We now have the ability to add rest to speeds. We have rest periods added to distance rest periods by lameness, failed to qualify at an event. If we have consecutive failed to qualify, we make extended rest periods. All of those things to protect our horses. But really, we have failed to set any standards for riders. The rider is on top of that horse, and they are the driver. And we have failed to set any standards really for riders. Yesterday, you heard the committee propose a percentage of successful completions be added to the criteria. We heard then that we need studies to determine, well, what level of successful completion or percentages would be fair and possible. We've had studies yesterday about speed and the impact that speed has on our horses. We as horsemen have always known that speed impacts our horses in a negative fashion. But somehow we needed studies to make it real. So now, do we need studies to know that the rider on top of the horse can determine its success or failure? Come on, folks. We all know that. We all know that. In my barn, if a horse fails at 50% or more of its competitions, unless there are real extenuating circumstances, I look for him to have another job. At the very minimum, the standards for our riders, both to access a level. I want you to think about this. A rider in our sport can ride 10 consecutive events, fail all of them, pass one, and move up a star level. Is that responsibility? Does that promote horsemanship? If our riders cannot pass at least 50% of the courses that they enter, should they move up a level? That should be the absolute minimum to move up or to compete in our higher level events. For me, I expect a higher standard, at least 2 out of 3 finishes. Last night, we gave awards for rider ranking. Juma, yesterday you talked about what would be a fair percentage. Maria won the top ranking in the world. She didn't do that by failing to finish competitions. And on top of that, she did it by going at speed. So there is someone who can be admired, respected, and inspire others to do the same. So that is my point of view. But I did canvass other riders, other athletes, and what was important to them going toward the future. There were 2 things that actually stood out. One was that they wanted more opportunities for competition. For financial, logistical, or other reasons, many riders cannot get to our world championships or WAG. Our sport is a goal-orientated sport. Riders need goals to aspire to. They wanted regional championships, national championships, other venues, other opportunities. Well, we are working on regional and national championships to have better accessibility and easier to organize and put together. There are also could be other opportunities. One of the things that has happened in the United States is an exchange program for young riders. You send us 4, we'll send you 4, and we'll provide horses so that you can compete or have the experience to compete in other parts of the world. You know, the one super thing about sports as a whole is it builds bridges, exposes us to cultures around the world, and builds friendships. This is an important part of sports as a whole that we should never forget. The other opportunities, when we talk about finances and all, You can Google Title IX USA, which is our government has passed a law that in universities that receive federal funding, that in their sports programs, they must spend equal amounts of monies on males and females. So there are lots of females in endurance. And that money can be used for coaching and for competition expenses. So that might let you think that there might be possibilities through government to have some increased support and funding. The other thing that riders told me that they really wanted was technical courses, more technical courses. They didn't want speed to be the only judgment of performance. So, and over, we've heard the negative impact of speed. We've said we need more technical courses to slow down the horses, all of that. But how have we made that happen? How can we inspire OCs to have more technical courses when in our own qualification process, we have a set speed that must be maintained to be able to enter in championship events? It's 14K per hour. It doesn't take into consideration the rise and fall of courses. It doesn't take into consideration the track, the weather, whether crewing is allowed on the course or not, all things that can slow down and make a ride more interesting, more fun, and safer for horses. So how can we convince OCs who want to attract riders who are now making faster and flatter courses to attract the rider so that they can reach the 14K per hour goal? How do we inspire them to have more technical courses? Can we rate courses? We've heard yesterday that we can check the weather and we can rate up and down and GPS and do all those things. And then do we go through a handicap system where we give points or we give speed points for more technical courses? I'm not sure exactly how we do that. Brian referred to the quilty in Australia. In America, we have the tevis. The tevis is a test of horses, riders, and horsemanship. It's 100 miles through the mountains. That, for me, is a world-class event, and world-class horses compete there. That event has never even been won at 14K per hour. Does it make it any less of a world-class event or world-class horses that finish in the top there because it's slower than 14K per hour? Those are things that we might think about. So my thoughts. We are the guardians of our sports. The decisions that we make will affect the future. We can grow bigger. We can have more types of competitions. We can have more countries involved. But in the end, if we do not protect our horses, our sport, and its reputation, there may come a day when we won't have a sport. When we think about the future, we need to put aside our personal agenda and our goals. And we must think what's best for riders, more importantly, what's best for horses, and most importantly, what's best for our sport. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I think that's a hugely inspirational start to the session. I think that's a fantastic contribution and really can start to make us think where we go. Our next speaker is the operations director for a company called the Horsepower Group, a company based in the UK who have been responsible for producing many of not just that country's, but many of the world's leading equestrian events across many disciplines. Specifically for endurance, he's been involved with the ride at the Royal Windsor Horse Show and more recently with the establishment and the management organization of multiple rides at Euston Park in the UK. He's also a voice that many of you may know and recognize as one of the leading announcers, commentators in the sports, again, particularly of dressage and jumping, but even of dog shows, would you believe it? The world famous Crufts dog show in the UK as well. So a man of many talents, and we'd like to invite him to present a few thoughts to take us on as well. Nick.
It was sitting at the back yesterday. Sorry about that. Thank you, Tim. You've actually stolen completely my thunder because there's my first slide. So as Tim said, we run many equestrian events around the world, but also other commemorative events for the UK government. Specifically this year, major commemoration service in Passchendaele in Belgium. And we also have a complete understanding of customer awareness. That has to be the key in the speech that I'm about to deliver. Believe that endurance, as Tim said, we have run Royal Windsor Endurance for the last 5 years under the patronage of His Majesty the King of Bahrain. We've also been involved in Euston Park over the last season, and on Sunday we had our first ride, which went really, really well. But it is a hidden gem. It, to other wider equestrians, and as Valerie has intimated too, it is all about horse welfare and all about standards. But it is perceived very much as a closed sport. We released a video of a British rider called Anna Williams on our Facebook page for Royal Windsor Endurance. That was seen by over 100,000 people. Now, this is the way that endurance can spread the word, that it is complete horsemanship and complete teamwork. We released a video on Friday night for our first Euston Park ride, combining pictures from Windsor and from last year's Euston Park. By Sunday night, that had been seen by 44,000 people. Now, these videos were not expensive to produce. The Windsor one cost us under £1,000, Euston Park, just under £1,500. And this is a way to project the sport of endurance around the world. There is also a complete lack of understanding in the wider equestrian community. Many people from my side of the fence, from the jumping side, people like Bob Ellis, who designed the courses in London 2012, did so very well, a complete horseman. He said, "Oh, endurance, really?" And I said, "But you don't understand it." And everybody in this room understands endurance, and that's why we're all here. I'm learning, believe you me. But we do have a positive message. Don't be frightened of talking about the good things. What I've heard over the last day is that there is a huge amount of research, there is a huge amount of positivity. But that message perhaps isn't getting through because of the few that are damaging the many's great contribution to sport. And that can go all the way through. I've also been lucky enough to be the operations director for the start of the Tour de France in Yorkshire in 2014. Now, cycling has a difficult reputation, but believe you me, the 4.2 million people that visited Yorkshire over that weekend, it's exactly the same principle as endurance. Why aren't those people watching endurance? I also believe that you have to educate first to be able to entertain. There has to be a willingness to encourage sponsors and the team principals. Every other equine sport, our sponsors and principals are allowed into the paddock at Royal Ascot. You're not going to stop Her Majesty the Queen going to see her horses. You're not going to stop Her Majesty the Queen talking to Sir Michael Strout, her trainer. You're not going to stop Longines, the FEI top partner, walking the course before the Longines World Cup final. in Ocala this year. So that has to be embraced. It really does. But our sponsors, perhaps some of them, don't actually understand the complexities and the teamwork involved in the sport of endurance. So it's up to us as the OC to go out and get the sponsors. We're very fortunate, but it's up to us to maintain and to encourage additional support. And as Brian said, the vision has to be for the OCs to be sustainable and with a future. The riders and trainers, I believe, from all other disciplines around the world in equestrian sport, particularly racing and jumping and dressage, they will do their utmost to thank the sponsors and the officials. That is absolutely key critical, because once you've engaged a rider or a trainer to your sponsor, it becomes a business. And then our sponsors can start to feel part of the family, the great family that is equestrian sport and endurance. And friendships are made, businesses deals are done. If I told you that the UK government had a naval base built in the Gulf because of endurance, that is the level of business that can be done. There should be guided tours of the loops. We shouldn't be frightened of taking our sponsors out on the loops. We should encourage them. They love it. And then they start to feel engaged. Then they start to feel welcome. And then there also must be, after the pre-ride, a welcome reception between the riders and the sponsors and the trainers, and to get everybody together. Because as we all know, endurance is very much a team sport. But it seems to me that sometimes our sponsors, our team principals, are left outside the gate. And that, to me, cannot be right. We've talked about embracing technology. Cycling is amazing in its sport, in its heart rate of the cyclists, in its GPS technology. It's very simple, and it's very simple to adapt. The Garmin technology that Team Sky, Team Movistar use for the Tour de France. And it's cheap. Believe you me, it's cheap. Obviously, the elite cyclists, their kit isn't cheap. One single bike costs £75,000 and they've got 6 of them. But actually, the bog standard technology is freely available to use. We saw yesterday from Pierre the course apps from Belgium, from the European Championships. You can do that on Google Earth. You can do a 360, and it doesn't take very long. The course mapping via Google Earth, it's so very simple these days. And that then will be giving you the inclines, the declines, and above all, will encourage more people to understand. And I do believe that that's what we should be doing. And also, there should be an interactive app on what endurance actually is. Because to be honest with you, you look at the graphs and the charts in the regulations of the speeds and the distances and the heartbeats. And to me, not being a scientist, you need to be a rocket scientist or an athlete or a trainer to actually physically understand it. And it's not difficult to explain. And that simplicity will give you more chances to encourage your sport. There has to be virtual routes at the pre-ride. But that can be done through a lot of timing systems these days, through the GPS tracking. We trialed it at Euston last weekend, where we GPSed every single moment of every single loop. And that will give you, imagine you're watching Formula One. On the top right-hand screen, you can see where Lewis Hamilton is, you can see where Sebastian Vettel is. That's the principles that we have to engage. And it actually doesn't cost that much. You can introduce body cams, just like they are in cycling and in rugby union and in horse racing. The body cams, then you can transfer the data, you can put it on, flash it up on your website immediately after each loop. That is so simple. We're lucky that we have a big screen at Euston. And that is vital for the athletes, for the trainers, but also for the public. Because I come on to my next point, which is commentary, which is something that I'm fortunate enough to have been involved in all my life. Without good commentary, without explaining to the public, and we saw from Brian's slides, 6,000 people watching the World Equestrian Games in Normandy 2-3 years ago. That could treble, could quadruple, could multiply by a factor of 10. If you look at the Tour de France in Yorkshire, we were expecting 1.2 million people to come to Yorkshire over those 2 days in July. We looked at the traffic cameras on the Wednesday night. We weren't due to start until the Saturday. And we saw that the major routes into Yorkshire were completely gridlocked. We went from an expectation of 1.2 million to 4.3 million people. Now that is the graph that endurance can do, with good commentary, with good technology, and above all, with communication. The public don't understand it. So let's take simplicities of endurance, and know that there are a huge amount of complexities, but let's take the ideas to the public. Simple thing, badminton, the trot up on Sunday morning. The vet raises his hat, the horse is passed, raises his bowler hat. We don't know in endurance, in the vet gates, if that horse has passed or failed. We don't see the raw emotion for each of the horses. And emotion is part of sport. So why not just put some red and green lights on the vet gate? The sheer satisfaction of a rider like Valerie getting passed through the vet gate and really thrilled about that. It's so easy to do. Another of my, and I've discussed this with the director, we wait, and we wait for schedules to be approved. And the athletes and the trainers, the riders, they don't mind who the officials are, who the line vets are, who the secondary treating vets are. Why not just put on there so you can get your schedules in 10 weeks in advance? As we heard yesterday from Harold, it's a small pool of officials. So, and a lot of people are busy all around the world. Why not just put the president of the ground jury, president of the veterinary commission, foreign veterinary delegate, the entry fees, because actually all the athletes are interested in are the distance of the ride, star rating, and who the travel arrangements, prize money is on offer, if any. So the schedule can be published 10 weeks in advance. It's a simple piece of technology. And then you can fill in your grand jury underneath. And it makes, to me, as an OC, it would make it an awful lot easier. Even yesterday, for Euston Park in 3 weeks' time, we had 2 officials pull out because they couldn't make it because of family commitments. Totally understand. That means that we're going to do an amendment, send it to Olga and to Mark. They have to check it. Then it has to come back out again. If you start early, then everything comes in early. There has to be, in any equine discipline, a very good relationship between the organizing committee, the officials. That is absolutely vital. It is the OCs, once any competition started from the vet checks, it is the OC's responsibility to hand over to the officials, and absolutely rightly so. The FEI regs really don't allow for the OC to have a lot of say in the competition once it has started. But it's the OC and the course designers that have designed the loops and know the terrain inside and out. And I do believe that there may be one little rule that would say in conjunction with. There is in the changing of the distance, changing of that, but it should always be in conjunction with. Very much believe that. If you interact with the public, I'm lucky enough to have been involved in the Tour de France and the World Rally Championship. We should encourage, I know that all the negatives immediately go out on social media, but the positives sometimes take a little bit more to get out there. We shouldn't be afraid of good horsemanship, good riding, and above all, good sport. We should be publicizing that. As Brian was talking about, we had fan zones, we had crew zones in the Tour de France and in the World Rally Championships. Why not do that in endurance? Highlight it. Put somebody out there that is explaining to those that have never seen it before what is actually going on at a crewing point, at a water, at a hilly bit, at a hilly incline. And then also, if we're going to encourage people to come in and see us, we should be providing a short information book on what the sport of endurance is all about. What the vets are looking at, heart rate, lesions, everything. What the crews are doing. When I first saw it, I thought, wow, this is just like a pit stop in Formula One. And you can actually relate to that correlation. You should also be talking about the response times when they come in through the arrivals lounge, into the crewing area, and then into the vet gate. We're dealing with the Gabrieleses, the Mo Farahs of the horse world. These are supreme equine athletes. And we should be telling that to the public. I also think, now this might be quite contentious, but the yellow jersey is synonymous with the leader of the Tour de France. Why on earth aren't we doing that in endurance after the first loop and the second loop? Doesn't encourage them to go any faster, because at Euston certainly we are all for the best condition award. But what it does do is it identifies with the public who was in the lead at the previous stage. It is also an added sponsor benefit, because to hand over the yellow jersey in the crewing area just before the start, going out on the second loop or the third loop, that could be a very good photo opportunity for your sponsors. I believe that we've heard about the 27% that maybe aren't in competition. There is in Great Britain an organization called the Retraining of Racehorses. So all the ex-racehorses, perhaps those that haven't gone fast enough, they've found a new job. And that is in a beauty class, in a show horse class. The Royal Windsor Horse Show last week, we had over 220 retrained racehorses competing in 3 competitions. And maybe the feet of a thoroughbred aren't as good as that of an Arabian, but it's another market, it's another area where we can be positive about what ex-racehorses are going to. The best rider, the best condition combination, we've heard all that before. But we should enhance those and embrace those. The best condition, I honestly feel, is a very, very valuable, positive tool for endurance. In the UK, we have a lot of national riders that are frightened to go on an international event. Oh my word, I can't do this. And if they go on an international event, they're totally, utterly overwhelmed by the real professionals in your sport, in our sport. So why not encourage them through a bronze league, silver league, and then the elite sport, the elite athletes of Varet and Co. becomes your gold league. To me, that enhances and embraces. It's done in jumping, it's done in driving, it's done in all the other disciplines, it's done in endurance, but simplify it. Simplify it to the number of starts, simplify it to the number of completions. That is very, very important. New formats. We've heard Brian talk about new formats for team competitions. And I know perhaps that Sabrina won't thank me for saying this, but the Global Champions League certainly enhanced different support. You don't need to have Team M7, Team F7, Team MRM. But I'm talking about Team Dolce, as Pierre's big sponsor from Belgium. You could have 2 from the 80, 2 from the young riders, 2 from the 120s, 1 from the 160. And then you could have the best 3 scores count. And it becomes team, and it becomes sponsors, and it becomes business, and it becomes self-perpetuating. Above all, the best condition award is absolutely crucial for preserving and promoting the sport of endurance. So to summarize, I do believe that endurance is a team sport which is open to all. It just needs a little bit of encouragement. There are massive opportunities to engage a wider equestrian audience to start with. Because you talk to the jumpers, you talk to dressage, you talk to the drivers, they don't know what the sport is all about. Why not? They know what jumping fences is, they know what driving horses are, they know what dressage, they know what a piaffe and a passage are. Why not? The ability to train a supreme equine athlete. And there are huge opportunities to engage sponsorship. And above all, it is the second largest discipline in the FEI. But it is a hidden gem, and unlock that gem and promote your sport. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. I can only agree so much, particularly in respect of explaining it to a new public. I always remember going to my first endurance event, which was at Windsor about 5 years ago, and the former endurance director of the FEI, Ian Williams, very kindly spent 2-3 hours with me. I met John Robertson for the first time also. He took me off around the course. And I came away from that day with a level of understanding that far exceeded what I had before, and therefore an appreciation. And I was brought into so much of what Nick has just painted there. I totally believe myself there's so much opportunity out there. So this is our first question and answer session. Your opportunity to give your thoughts on some of the ideas that have been put forward. A few notes that I made: we've covered rider standards and how we manage that going forward. The challenge of perhaps looking at different formats, series, championships, technical courses. Do we have a more complex way of looking at course design and course rating and how that might be done? We were challenged that the sport is currently perhaps perceived as being closed. We're not doing a good enough job at getting the positives out there. Too much of the debate, whether it be on social media or within the community, has been about the negatives. We've just heard so many positives that could be put out there. Technology. Already the sport is making good use of technology, but clearly so much more potential to be had. How is the sport presented to the public? How are sponsors engaged? How can we make sure that the processes for organizers through the production of schedules, the relationship between officials and organizers is optimal and makes for good competition? The lead rider possibility, the yellow bib, the yellow jersey concept from cycling. So a lot of ideas there. Over to yourselves to comment on any of that, or you may indeed have your own fresh ideas you'd like to put forward and bring to the table.
When you know your sport, you often look at the future very traditionally. I don't know your sport, but to me, it is very obvious that your discipline could be a para-discipline. It could be only walk, 1 kilometer, 10 kilometers, I don't know, only trotting, assisted by an assistant on a mountain bike or whatever. That's very emotional and that's very popular, and that will give sponsorships. I'm just thinking a thought worth giving a thought for you. Thank you.
Brian.
That thought of a para discipline has been around for a little while. And the last time I made some inquiries about it, it's a very complicated process to get approval for that. I don't know enough about it, just that some people that were involved, I think it was with another sport, not involved with the FEI, and they went through their safety and workplace health and safety obligations they had to meet, and it's a very big process. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means you have to look at it again through fresh eyes.
Well, if I can answer that, Brian,
Yes.
we had at Windsor 2 weeks ago a para rider, and through the riding for the disabled, so it can be done.
Yes, please.
Yes. You asked the question where you want the sport to go. I would like the horse to go, the sport to go to Africa, to Asia, promote the sport because it's natural. It is doesn't cost as much as other sport or disciplines. So I would like to see this. Other thing is if we think of sustainability, few sponsors sponsoring endurance compared to other disciplines. So why not to create kind of fund, small percentages from the entry fees, the prize money, to create fund to ensure the long-term sustainability of the maintaining the sport. Also, kind of promotion of the sport to invite champions from other disciplines to ride small events, maybe 1 star or 40 kilometer. So this will bring more audience, promote the discipline. Thank you.
So the development of the sport around the world and how to encourage that.
I think that's a brilliant idea, Ali, to encourage other equestrian stars. Maybe Sam would like to come to Euston very soon. Where are you, Sam? Maybe you'd like to come and see us at Euston. And actually, that is all about raising public awareness and the profile of endurance and using other athletes from other equestrian disciplines to come and take part. And I think that is a really, really good idea. I'll see you there in June, Sam. It's the week after Tats.
In America, we do have several event riders who are crossing over into endurance, and most are very excellent riders. And they, though, are finding some challenges about how to pace and manage a horse over long distance. And so we both learn from each other. It is always interesting and a learning opportunity to share your sport with other real horsemen.
And Brian, the idea about the funding support developing nations.
We do have that now through Solidarity to help the development of countries that are having difficulty, and there is funding available. We've got now, China is starting in endurance, and it's a very low level now, but you know, I forgot how many people there are in China. I can't count on my fingers that number. But if you've had a big country like China, that would be the next growth center logically for endurance, because we are now in Asia and in Malaysia and Thailand have started to have endurance competitions. There's not enough room in Taipei, but there's Korea, it looks at it. It is creeping around. Just that I was really impressed with Nick's presentation, because it took me out of my backyard at Sanford and said, you know, look at this, I think the Tour de France is what you were basing a lot of your comments on, and the similarity between endurance and the Tour de France, although one's mechanical, there's a lot of similarity in sports structure, and I think we have a lot to learn from that. And I know in the last Tour de France, and probably always, they have people out on the track in France where they take their lunch and they stay there all day, and there's lots of people enjoying that. And we have never gone and developed that. We don't like people being out on the track that much. It might interfere with the sport, and we should look at these things through fresh eyes. And Nick, I've just inducted you into our subcommittee of advertising and promotion, and our first meeting's in about 10 minutes, and I've put away the rest of the day, actually.
Thanks a lot. My flight's at 8, Brian. Yeah.
Excellent, very good. I think a comment just up on the, just it, and then up to the right afterwards.
Thank you, everybody. Speaking for the French Federation, sorry. Well, I'm very glad to work for endurance discipline for the last 20 years, I think, personally. as official vet and treating vet. And I'm nevertheless, even if I understand perfectly the enhance and the improvement of this fantastic discipline, and the future is quite positive. I'm convinced about it. But for the last 2 or 3 years, for the last 5 years maybe, we have seen loads of dope tests, positive and catastrophic injury or failure. And I think we, and you, FEI, put a lot of pressure of officials, and it's quite necessary, and we need it, definitely. But what about riders? What about the formation? What about the education, qualification? Anybody could be a rider in endurance, and it's a tough problem for us, because for next year we cannot improve that with the same qualification system. Why not a PTV for the internet examination for riders? It's so easy. I'm glad to see that for the marketing of the discipline, we are on the positive signs. We have, according all what we have said, we are going in the welfare. Definitely, it's fantastic. But if we don't change, if we do not modify the system for riders, we're going into the wall, because they are unable to understand. If they are on the saddle, into the vet gate, roaming, crewing, they do not understand. Truly, if a vet is rider, he is able to don't see, he becomes blind, because he's competition. And we are responsible of that. As you said, Brian, if a horse, Valerie, sorry, if a horse failed, we are responsible. Human beings responsible in 99% of situations. A bug, internet bug, a computer bug, is due to a human being's mistake. So I think, for instance, a dope horse rider, if he's taken off his mistake, the sentence of 2 or 3 months, sorry for the word, it's ridiculous. We need, and particularly in cycling, now the sentences are 2 years, not 2 months or 3 months. It's 2 years. And in case of recidive, it's ad libitum, ad vitam. That's one of the most important points for the next years. We cannot improve the discipline with the same basically sentence for the rider. You know, it's a system of pyramid. If the pyramid is not on the good base, she cannot. It cannot stay for the life.
The top will be weak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have to improve that. But I'm particularly glad that we don't see 6 years old horses on the 2 stars for the next years. That's one of the most positive decision for the discipline, because speed and youth, it's particularly responsible of casualties. So we have many things to speak about.
Thank you,
go on.
Valerie. That's
Thank
very
you.
much
Thank you.
your point on rider
Yes.
development.
I totally agree with you. My approach, though, would be to make finishing competitions have more value and more of a goal, so a positive, so that there is not a punishment for not finishing, but a level that you must reach in order to advance, a positive. Learn how to ride better, learn how to pace your horse, learn how to bring the horse through, which is beneficial for both the horse and rider to be able to move forward. there has to be, in my opinion, a level of standard that you must be able to complete a certain number of positive events to move forward. And if you lose that positive percentage, that at some point, whether it be, if you can't bring it up within 24 months, you go down, you go backwards. We have that system for horses, actually, but there is no system in place to allow riders to advance based on their successful completion of events. And I think this is a mistake.
Rewarding positives. Yes, please.
Yes, Valerie. I'm Ursula speaking from Germany. I'm athlete, I'm trainer, I'm FEI vet, official as judge and organizer. So I have several points. Thank you all for the inputs. It was really very interesting. The summary from me is that the point is welfare of the horse, horsemanship, and education of the rider. So I heard welfare of the horse, but I also heard you want to put the weight to 75 kilogram. That's for me not welfare for the horse. Martha, do you have any input about the pain of the back of the horses for that weight? No, I think there is no input about that, no study about that. So please think about, if you have a man with 80 kilogram, he can use a horse which is able to carry 80 kilogram. But if you are a woman with 55 kilogram, you have to put that weight to a horse. And I think every that weight is not for welfare of the horse. This is one of the points. The other point is, you all speak about more technical courses. That's correct. But to have more technical courses, we need really better education of the riders. And that's not the target of the FEI. That's the target of all the national federations you are here. You have to look that you send riders to international events, they show quality, and they show all their horsemanship they have. And that's the really issue for the national federations. So, thank you.
Thank you. Maybe on the weights, first of all, there was a little bit of debate yesterday around this point, and even some comments as to whether not only should the weight be consistent across the one star as well as the other star events, but equally some comment about whether there should be the weight limit at all.
Can I
Who's
speak
best on
to
this,
this?
Valerie?
Can I speak to this?
You really want to start the debate on weights again?
I think
Sorry.
it's
I
time, right?
just, okay, I just want to make a comment. I mean, I'm not a big person. And I have made the weight since the beginning. And I've used heavier saddles. If you want to avoid back pain, you'll make sure the saddle fits. And you won't buy a saddle because of the weight of the saddle, but the fit of the saddle. And that's how to avoid back pain along with balanced riders.
Valerie, yes, I agree with you, but don't tell me that a girl from 55 kilogram train the horse with the weight for 75 kilogram the whole time. They always use the weight 1 or 2 weeks before the competition, and I think
That's a choice
Yeah,
they
but-
make.
But why we should do that? Why? It's easy.
So why don't they train the horse with the weight the whole time?
But-
That's a trainer choice.
But if it's welfare for the horse, it's not to put that weight on the horse. Why? Why? For what issue? For what target? Why?
Stefan, just can we have the microphone just down there, please?
Up here, Stefan.
One of the ways to reduce the speed is to put weight on the horses. For example, we have one ride in Francis Linear. The average winner speed is 21 kilometers an hour every year since 5 years. Last year, we organized junior young rider championships on the same place, same distance, same course, without weight. Winner time was 23.5.
We've had someone, so we've just had a gentleman up on the right who's been very patient. Thank you. And then we'll come back down.
Good morning. My name is Major Yap.
Sorry, excuse me. The gentleman just up on the right is person. Okay.
Today topic is, thank you for FEI bringing up this topic. It's very good topic. Modernization of our sport. So please stay focused on this. Important for us, your small nation. The word I would like to have FEI committee to think about it, transformation. We need to transform. Whatever we are doing past, we need to transform. With the new technology, with the new challenge we have, we are the second largest sport. We need to transform. We need to stay focused what we want to talk today. What I propose to the committee, if can, if possible, we should take the jumping as a model or dressage as a model. Example, what I would like to say is, we create a FEI committee, create a 1 year annual final World Cup for the endurance. Then have a league. Only the top horses go to the final. Then you will attract the sponsor, attract the best athlete. Get a formula, draw up the best rider, the best horses into the final once a year. So I hope our technical committee can take the jumping and dressage as a model or eventing as a model, work on it. My experience in China last month, just 80 kilometers, I have 120 spectators along the track. And then Longjin, the owner of the, not say owner, the in charge, Longjin in Beijing, he's surprised. He talked to me, Major, why can't Longjin sponsor the endurance in China? So these are the things that, you know, the technical committee should look into. I hope the floor here, please focus on modernization of the sport for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps before Brian, we'll just take the comment from on the right and then come back to the panel. Yes, please.
Mohammed Isa from United Arab Emirates. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Basically, I need your attention because I think the subject I'm going to talk about is a little bit sensitive, and all of us trying to avoid it as much we can. It is the speed. I'm going to talk about the speed. I believe in the endurance, all of us, our concern is the speed. And we are looking to the speed as one of the main problems we are causing the fractures and the issues we have got in endurance. But also we need to look to the speed as one of the natural movement of the development and how we are moving in our sport. So this is sport, we cannot stop the speed, how it's going with it, because the movement, what's happening, the latest technology in the training, in the feeding, in the breeding, all this is affecting. So you cannot expect that this is speed, how it used to be 20 years ago, it will remain as it is today. Yes, we have issues with the speed, I understand that, but we cannot stop the speed because we need to understand that if we're going to stop the speed, we are killing the sport. One of the most important things to keep the sports going on is the competition. So the competition is depending on the speed. How you want to improve your sport on one side and you're expecting to kill the speed from the other side. We need to look to the speed in a positive way. We are, as a people involved in our sport, we need to have the barriers, we need to put the borders, we need to put the ideas to control and to move the speed in the right direction, instead of expecting that, no, we're going to kill the speed. If we're going to kill the speed, we're going to kill our sport.
Brian, I think.
You can wait. Mohammed Issa, thank you very much for that comment on speed, and I don't think anyone's upset that you've raised it. It's very important. This is a competition against the clock. It's a competition against the terrain. It is. There is no limit put on the speed of the horse. I think in the Bo Deep part on the national rides, they were putting a limit on the horse's speed. We're not putting a limit on the horse's speed at all. What we're saying is that if the horse's welfare is okay, it's not a problem. But when the horse's welfare overall is being compromised by speed, we're obligated to do something about it. Now, we're not going out and saying you will ride at 15 kilometre an hour. We're saying you will ride within the confines of the parameters that are allotted to you. So therefore, if the welfare is getting to a point that we're getting worried about, we will use whatever power we have to slow horses down. But we're not going to stop them. We're going to slow them down, and so that they have to work harder to get through the parameters. Now, that's a legitimate tactic for us to do for horses, because they have to carry us through this sport. So as long as we are meeting the welfare requirements, we will do the right thing by the horse. When we miss the welfare requirements and we have an increase in catastrophic injuries, or we have some other injury, we have to look at some way at reducing it. So you can only reduce it by putting a technical track on, reducing the speed of the horse, or by making the examination parameters tighter than what they were previously. That's for the benefit of the horse, and it's for the benefit of the sport. And that's the bigger picture that we have to look at all the time. Thank you.
Lady on the left, and then lady on the right of it.
Yes, Morgan, I'm living in the UK. I'm a vet. I used to be a rider, a breeder, an FEI official, a groom, and so on. So I've seen the discipline from all sides. I've seen it in France, and I've seen it for many years now in the UAE. And I'm lucky to be part of the Boudib group. The speed limit put in Boudib was a way to try to test and see if we could reduce injuries by reducing the speed, because that's something that people didn't believe at the beginning. Now by introducing tracks, there's no speed limit anymore, because no horse can go to 20 kilometers per hour in the dunes. So I love the sport as it is in both places, Europe and UAE, but we understand these are two. Unfortunately, we might have to have and giving regulations for different locations might be the way to curb the injuries. Unfortunately, you cannot take into account, you cannot have the same discipline in Germany or in Malaysia and in UAE as long as you keep the tracks as they are. And if in Germany they don't want 65 kilos because they think it's not good for the welfare of the horse, definitely in UAE it's necessary to slow down horses, and in France in some places it's necessary as well. So I think as long as we see the discipline as one, it's going to be very difficult to take into account the local discrepancies and differences, because we have very different disciplines now.
So does this link particularly to the issue of how courses are designed and graded, and is there a cleverer way of specifying how the course is designed and versus how that competition is managed and how the rules are aligned to different types of courses?
You've just opened a big subject.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, big subject. And one thing was mentioned yesterday, we have started looking at tracks and rating tracks. We think that it's only fair that that be an equation in the competition. We don't have an answer for that yet. We've got to do it. I always, when you talk about changing rules, and like this, I always think of that quote that says, some people see things as they are and say why, and some people see things as they could be and say why not. You want to be on the why not side. And so many of us are saying why. We want to leave things as they are, but sometimes it pays to stand on the other side and say, why not? So what you've said, a lot of things, and say, well, why not? Why can't we rate the track? That's very important. And I think, but I'd say why, and you'd say, well, it's a good idea to look at this. But I don't have the answer for the track grading yet. We need to handicap to do that sort of thing.
Lady on the right, who's again patiently, sorry, and then we'll come to you, I promise you. Oh, you're a very kind community, letting each other go first.
I'd like to get back to the education of the rider, which I think is of absolute prime importance. Because if your rider is not educated, and we've got lots more people coming into the sport. Now, I've been in the sport for 40 years. And we've been learning by doing for a long time. And I think we must start learning from scratch. Now, in Germany, we have certificates of endurance competency, which now our international riders have to complete before they are allowed to go on an international ride. This includes equitation, which is extremely important because our perception to the public and to other disciplines, they say, and just look at those endurance riders. They look like sacks of potatoes. And I say, no, there are a lot of riders that ride extremely well, but this is the public perception. And if we can improve equitation, then you will prevent accidents. People can control their horses. You can increase speed without increasing the effort that the horse is having to put in, because if you're doing a steady gallop, it's much less energy requiring than if you're doing a fast stop-go gallop. It means that the riders also have to know how to plan their ride, how to feed their horses, how to look after their horses, know what shoeing's about, transport, the whole part of endurance. Now, I did a test in Iran in March. We've done the tests in Germany, they work. Not necessarily that the people think that they're particularly good because we're endurance riders and we don't need it. But I did a test in Iran with a riding instructor, 4 days. And the riders that we had 3 beginners and 5 that were somewhat more experienced. But they had no idea of how to walk, trot, or gallop. You fell from a walk into a trot, and you fell from a trot into a gallop. After 4 days, we had got 4 of these people able to gallop on the right leg. And they're now keeping contact with me and saying, we're making advances. I can now work with my horse. And I think this is the way we want to go forward. It will improve our image. It will improve the welfare of the horse. And it will improve the quality of endurance riding overall. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady on the right behind you, please.
Sorry?
The FEI, through the Solidarity Department, has launched endurance coaching system, and which is open and available to any national federation who wants to take advantage of that. So there is now in place within the FEI the endurance coaching system. It's very standardized. If you see the book, the logbook, the books, you will realize how standardized and complete that it is.
Lady on the right.
Yeah.
Here you go. The chance.
I'm very happy that Mr. Mohammed Isa opened up this subject, and I think that unfortunately it's already day 2, but now we are starting to talk about the serious stuff. I think speed is a very important matter, and as a trainer I aim to make my horse faster and last longer, so that's definitely one of the goals I go for. And I think that the problem is not the speed at all. I did a FEI 120 in an average speed of 29.47. Horse recovered really well, could have done another loop after that. I'm more than happy. The problem is that most of the time the horses and riders doing this speed are not capable of this. And this is why I was so happy to let Ms. Juliette talk before me, because she mentioned this. The speed itself, totally, I don't agree that we have to bring it down in any way. I hope that in 10 years' time we can do the speed average 35. The point is that the horses and the riders need to be ready and capable to do this. And in the last 2 days, I haven't heard anything that will achieve that. You can make a more technical course, but when I speak to riders who are going very fast and I ask them, why did you go that fast? I get only 2 answers. One is I had no control, and the other one is the trainer wants me to. So the rider is either not responsible or not capable to control his horse. And I think there are 2 things that you can do. Is either you grade the horses, so you cannot do a fast speed unless you are capable to do a speed that is, for example, 10% less, not go from 16 average to 25 average. or to reduce recovery time. I don't understand why a horse needs 20 minutes recovery time. Never in my whole life have I ridden a horse that took more than 10 minutes to recover and was fit to do the race. It was just not his time. We had to go home, practice more, and come back another day.
Brian, do you want to? Or Valerie?
Can I add something to the two ladies talking ahead of me? This is from a different type of a sport, which is not a sport at all. I had a horseback riding stable for tourism and for 20 years about. And there we don't work with the minimum weight, there we work with maximum weight. Okay, so the maximum weight in general is like about 100 kilos that the horse should be able to, so, that should be able to take. So what I observed in the 20 years, if we have riders that know what they're doing and they have 100 kilos, the horse is totally fine after about 2-3 hours of going, walking, trotting, and the horse comes back and is like not tired at all. If we have a sack, a potato on a horse for 2 hours or an hour that bumps in the horse's back, I feel so sorry for the horse because the horse is tired, is like devastated, needs a break. So for the welfare of the horse, education of the rider is the most important thing.
Thank you. Because time is moving on, I'm just going to allow Brian and Valerie to respond, and then we're going to close the topic. And I just want to give Nick and the presentation, the sports presentation side, an opportunity as well. So, Brian, Valerie?
I do agree with everything that you're saying, and I do agree that a balanced and good rider who has trained their horses properly can handle the speed. And the real problem is that we lack a standard for riders. Also, my personal experience too is that a flatter, faster track does not allow or does not make it necessary for a rider to be a good rider, because all they have to do is sit there face forward and not fall off. So, you know, when we talk about technical tracks slowing down horses, technical tracks also require a level of skill in riding. I don't know if we can demand or make riding lessons as part of the criteria to compete. I don't know, maybe we can. However, it certainly is part of my program, and I'm willing to bet that it's part of more successful riders and stables program also. So it is included in the endurance coaching and training system package, and there part of that is actually teaching a horse how to or teaching a rider how to simple exercises to get control and really know what's happening between their legs. So I would recommend that. But yes, all of my students, I don't say I have students because I'm not really a riding instructor. I think of myself as more as a mentor, but I have always promoted that endurance riders take riding lesson. It's not only beneficial for them, but it's totally beneficial for horses. And I call riding lessons, if we would think of riding in an arena and lessons as gymnastics or going to the gym for the horse, you can absolutely boost the training effect and be able to teach the horse to use both sides of its bodies, prepare the horse to use both sides of its body, and the rider to be more balanced, in control, and have absolutely a sounder, better result.
Right, I'm going to take just two more comments on this topic from the gentlemen who have the microphones at the moment. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity in part B of this morning to come back to some of these areas, but we then must move on. So please, gentlemen here on the right and then down to the front.
Good morning. Valerie, you mentioned that the idea, and someone else, it was to lower the speed. So my question is, how could you explain that for the past years, endurance has had the growth Brian was showing us. And this growth of the sport has come on the same line of the growth of the speed. So what I want to ask you is, do you think or do you feel that this sport will continue growing if what is being proposed is to lower the speed? That is one of the questions.
You have to understand that the lowering of the speed is to get control of the horses and riders for safety and welfare. It's not our desire to restrict speed if horses and riders can do that safely and well. And the first part of my speech as a rider is I want to be involved in a sport that can be respected and admired and inspire others. When you see horses that have broken legs, a lot of injuries, standing around with a dull glaze in their eyes and their heads dropped, that does not inspire me or the public that our sport is okay. So, yes, the speed has gone forward. We have implemented many rules in the FEI to protect the horses. But is it enough? Has it completely done the job? Can we do better? I think we can.
I agree with you, we can do better. But I think the approach to do everything better is always consider that speed is of essence. And why? Nick, for example, who I think has a new or more fresh vision, maybe because he has not been involved for many years, he was talking about comparing cycling with endurance. Cycling is race, cycling is speeding. He was telling us that it would be good to market the sport by have a yellow bib for the leader. So it looks like we must never, ever put aside speed. Always, of course, having in mind welfare of the horse. But it has to have a good balance. And by having a good balance, what is important is not to have only one vision, saying the only way to tackle injuries is by lowering the speed. I think there is a lot of more data that has to be collected because of what was spoken here. I would say that most of the people here is or could agree that there is a lot of more data that has to be brought to the sport in order to have new rules that would protect welfare of the horses.
How much data do we need to have to know that the rider who sits on the back of the horse is controlling how that horse performs? We know that. So we have to educate riders, and we have to use maybe techniques, in a riding arena to make them a better rider. You can use cones and poles to make them more balanced and to make the horse more in control and effective. So we can use technical courses to make riders better riders.
Well, in order not to continue, what is important is to say that we have to have in balance welfare of the horse and speed. So what I miss within all of this conversation is to address speed in a positive way.
Thank you. I think this may be a conversation that will continue beyond today. Please, just one final comment in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Is this okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Just a quick note on what you said about cyclists. You do know the speeds for Tour de France is very different for example, the Tour de France, the Flemish lands, just because of the track. Yeah. Because the Tour de France is completely flat, and on the Flemish, for example, they have a lot of faults because they use adequates. So since the track is different, the speed is also much lower. Now to my questions. On the education side, just a comment. I do think it is great for the FEI to have a coaching system, but I think it is the responsibility of national federation or even territorial federations in your case to deal with education of riders. I think we're talking FEI is already international level. When we speak international, we're already at a higher level. We're talking a high level competition. So the riders who get there, it is my opinion that they should already have some systems in place to be there with a high quality or at least a medium high quality of riding and not let everyone go through. In our side, maybe as an example, we have since maybe 8 or 10 years ago developed the Gallop system, which is very similar to the French system, I think. And it's basically a system for riders to level up before they are allowed to go into higher levels, into higher kilometer distances, and ultimately into international level. And it's not perfect, but it's at least something. Now, for my question, and this goes to Nick. The first day I got here on Monday, as I had a conversation with Stefan. We were talking about giving goals to everyone who is not going to a championship, because that's more or less everyone who is not in the 5 in a team. Maybe this year in the games we will be 3, we will see. But that's a lot of people. And when our conclusion was we don't really have ideas. I saw in your speech you were talking about gold, silver, bronze leagues. Could you expand on those ideas?
Yeah, it's one of the principles that we use in British show jumping. And that is for the up-and-coming young riders, the up-and-coming amateur riders who have got a good horse. Now, from what I've seen over the last 2 to 3 years in the sport of endurance, is that your FEI riders, your international riders, are very, very talented in many respects. But the young riders, the new riders, are not able or don't feel comfortable to go into an international sphere. And that, to me, is where your growth is in the sport. If you said for an 80-kilometer and you have an amateur division, a bronze division, and that bronze division is perhaps those that have done less than 10 starts. The silver division, you go from 10 to 15 or 10 to 20. And then, obviously, like Valerie, with your elite riders, you have your gold standard. But what it's doing, to me, is it's encouraging new national riders into the international sport of endurance. It's exactly the same as a top 5-star show jumper training an amateur rider. But we all say that endurance is a team sport. But you get a great mass start coming up behind you, you're going to be quite frightened. You're going to be intimidated by that mass start. So I do like the idea of the staggered starts yesterday. We run it in national endurance, in Endurance Great Britain. But I think it's all about being part of the family. So your new riders go into the bronze division. They're helped, they're aided by the OCs, by the international riders, and they get to see what crewing is on the crew points, and they're engaged. And then they go into the next league, and then so on. But on from your point, Danny, about the goals, and the championships in endurance undoubtedly are the goals. But perhaps there could be a series at Euston Park that you compete in 2. We're lucky enough to have 4 or 5 rides this year. Perhaps there could be similar in France, a French league, international French league, combining with Belgium. You know, the championships are, for any elite athlete, not only in horse sport, but all the way around the world, championships, the ultimates, they are the ultimates. But there can be other major competitions where there is an aspiration, and there always has to be an aspiration to compete and to push yourself if you want to become the best athlete in your division. An aspiration should not be knocked down, it should be encouraged, and it should be enhanced. And I think we all, as OCs and national federations, have a duty to encourage as many athletes in correct riding and in correct sport as possible. So there is a small acorn of an idea in my head.
Thank you, Nick. So just one final comment I'm going to invite, but particularly on any of the other areas that Nick touched on, the areas of how the sport is presented, technology, how this is really put across and sold, the positives being sold. The lady at the top on the right-hand side, please. Then you can have a cup of coffee.
Yes, good morning. Pauline from Clean Endurance. One of the questions I've asked myself about the future of endurance is, who is the star in our sport? Is it the rider? Is it the horse? Or is it the combination? And I don't have a definite answer. I obviously have my personal opinion, but I think that's something we all need to think about. And I'm piggybacking on Nick's and Valerie's comments on sport as emotion. Maybe endurance is a horse sport where there's a very good opportunity to try and make the horse a bigger star. And I'm particularly obviously thinking about longevity and, you know, horses going through longer careers, which is potentially, from a marketing perspective, something very interesting. So that was a short comment.
I'll give you
on that.
3 names. Frankel, Arrogate, and Bellegro. So it's the horse. For me, all the time, it's the horse.
I think that's a very appropriate note to finish part A on. Please go and have a cup of coffee. Can I ask, we are a little bit behind, inevitably, that you come back at 11 for the final session. Thank you.